The gunshot that rang through Sierra City, California that autumn morning in 1877 was not aimed at flesh but at a canvas tent where two young women lay burning with fever, their father having just fired his rifle into the air to summon help from anyone who might hear. Delilah Rose and her younger sister Dorothy Rose had been strong as wildcats just 3 days prior, helping their father run the general store on Main Street. But the influenza had swept through them like wildfire through dry brush, leaving them weak and shivering despite the warmth of the October sun outside. Zachariah Owen was mending fence posts on the eastern edge of town when he heard the shot, his calloused hands stilling on the wire as he lifted his head to listen. Another shot followed, then silence. Something was wrong. He dropped his tools and swung himself up onto his buckskin mare, urging her into a gallop toward the sound. Dust kicked up behind him as he rode, his dark hair whipping beneath his worn hat, his blue eyes scanning the buildings ahead for signs of trouble. When he reached the general store, he found Thomas Rose standing in the street with his rifle lowered, his face haggard with exhaustion and fear. The older man looked up at Zachariah with desperate eyes. "My girls," he said, his voice cracking. "They are sick. Real sick. The doctor left town 2 days ago to tend to folks in the mining camps up north, and I do not know what to do." Zachariah dismounted quickly, tying his horse to the post. "Let me see them," he said, following Thomas through the store and out back to where the family kept their living quarters. The small wooden structure had 2 rooms, and in one of them, Zachariah could hear the sound of labored breathing and occasional coughing. He had seen Delilah Rose around town plenty of times. She was 22, with chestnut hair that caught copper in the sunlight and green eyes that seemed to see right through a man's pretenses. She was known for her sharp wit and sharper tongue when it came to haggling with suppliers, but also for her kindness to the children who came into the store with pennies clutched in their small fists. Her sister Dorothy was 19, quieter but no less determined, with the same chestnut hair and a gentler disposition that balanced her older sister's fire. Now both young women lay in their beds, their faces flushed with fever, their hair damp with sweat. Delilah's eyes were closed, her breathing shallow and rapid. Dorothy was awake but barely, her gaze unfocused as she stared at the ceiling. The room smelled of sickness and fear. "How long have they been like this?" Zachariah asked, kneeling beside Delilah's bed and pressing the back of his hand to her forehead. She was burning up, her skin dry and hot to the touch. 3 days now," Thomas said, wringing his hands. "Started with Dorothy, then Delilah got it the next morning. I have been giving them water, trying to keep them cool, but the fever is not breaking. I am afraid, Owen. I am truly afraid." Zachariah stood, his mind racing through everything he had learned from his mother before she passed. She had been a healer of sorts, someone the community turned to when the doctor was unavailable or too expensive. He had watched her tend to sick neighbors and friends throughout his childhood, absorbing her knowledge even when he thought he was not paying attention. "They need fluids," he said firmly. "Not just water. Something with nourishment. Something that will give them strength to fight this." He turned to Thomas. "Do you have a chicken? Vegetables? Herbs?" Thomas nodded quickly. "We have chickens in the coop out back. There are vegetables in the store, and my wife grew herbs before she passed. I kept some dried." "Good," Zachariah said. "I am going to make a broth, a strong one. My mother used to make it for fever patients. It helped them more than anything else." He paused, looking at the 2 women again. "You need to rest, Thomas. You look like you are about to fall over. I will watch them while the broth cooks." Thomas hesitated, clearly torn between his exhaustion and his duty as a father. "I cannot just leave them." "You are not leaving them. I am here, and if you collapse from exhaustion, you will be no good to anyone." Zachariah's voice was gentle but firm. "Get some sleep. Even an hour will help." Finally, Thomas nodded and shuffled off to the other room, too tired to argue further. Zachariah set to work immediately. He went out to the chicken coop and selected a plump hen, dispatching it quickly and cleanly. He plucked and cleaned it with practiced efficiency, then brought it back inside to the small kitchen area. In the store, he gathered what he needed: onions, carrots, celery, garlic. He found the dried herbs Thomas had mentioned, recognizing thyme, sage, and bay leaves among them. Back in the kitchen, he built up the fire in the stove and set a large pot of water to boil. While he worked, he kept one ear tuned to the sounds from the bedroom. Dorothy coughed weakly, and he heard Delilah mumble something incoherent. He moved quickly, chopping vegetables with swift, sure strokes, adding them to the pot along with the chicken. He crushed garlic cloves and tossed them in, then added generous pinches of the dried herbs. Salt went in last, along with a few peppercorns he found in a jar. The broth needed to simmer for hours to extract all the goodness from the bones and vegetables, but Zachariah knew they did not have hours to waste. He kept the fire hot, stirring occasionally, skimming the foam that rose to the surface. The kitchen began to fill with the rich, savory aroma of the cooking broth. After about 2 hours, he deemed it ready enough. He strained out the solids, leaving a clear, golden liquid that steamed in the bowl. He ladled some into 2 smaller bowls and carried them carefully into the bedroom. Dorothy was easier to rouse. He helped her sit up, propping pillows behind her back, and held the bowl to her lips. "Drink this," he said gently. "You will feel better." She took a small sip, then another. Her eyes focused on him for the first time, confusion evident in their depths. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Zachariah Owen. I am here to help. Keep drinking." He encouraged her to take as much as she could, pleased when she managed to finish half the bowl before falling back against the pillows, exhausted but with a bit more color in her cheeks. Delilah was more difficult. She did not want to wake up, turning her head away when he tried to coax her. "Delilah," he said, his voice low and insistent. Delilah rose. "You need to drink this. Your father needs you. Your sister needs you. Come on now, open your eyes." Her eyelids fluttered, and those green eyes appeared, glassy with fever but aware. She looked at him without recognition, her lips cracked and dry. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Someone who is not going to let you give up," he said, sliding an arm behind her shoulders to lift her. She was light, too light, and he could feel the heat radiating from her body. "Drink this. You will feel better." He held the bowl to her lips, and she drank, coughing a little at first but then managing to swallow. The broth was still hot but not scalding, and he watched her throat move as she took sip after sip. When she had finished about 3/4 of the bowl, she pushed weakly against his arm, and he lowered her back down. "Rest now," he said softly. "I will be here." He stayed with them through the afternoon and into the evening, bringing more broth every few hours, helping them drink even when they protested. Thomas woke and came to relieve him, but Zachariah refused to leave. "I will stay the night," he said. "You should eat something yourself and keep resting." Through the long hours of darkness, Zachariah dozed in a chair between the 2 beds, waking at every sound to check on the sisters. He dampened cloths in cool water and laid them across their foreheads. He held bowls of broth and coaxed them to drink. He spoke to them in low, reassuring tones, even when he was not sure they could hear him. Somewhere in the deepest part of the night, Delilah's fever broke. He felt it happen, the sudden coolness of her skin when he checked her temperature, the way her breathing eased and deepened. Relief flooded through him, so intense it left him shaking. He covered her with a lighter blanket and turned his attention to Dorothy, who was already breathing easier herself. By dawn, both sisters were sleeping peacefully, their fevers reduced to barely above normal. Thomas came in to find Zachariah still in his chair, the empty broth pot on the table beside him. The older man's eyes filled with tears. "They are better," he said, touching each daughter's forehead in turn. "You saved them." Zachariah stood stiffly, his muscles protesting after a night in the wooden chair. "The broth did it," he said, "and their own strength. They are fighters, your daughters." "Stay for breakfast," Thomas insisted. "It is the least I can do." Over eggs and coffee, Thomas told Zachariah about his family. His wife Margaret had died 2 years prior from pneumonia, leaving him to raise the girls alone. They had moved to Sierra City from Sacramento 5 years ago, seeking opportunity in the growing mining town. The general store had been Margaret's dream, and the girls had helped make it a success. "Delilah has her mother's head for business," Thomas said with a sad smile. "And Dorothy has her heart. Together they keep me going." The first time Delilah was truly coherent, she cornered Zachariah in the kitchen. "My father told me what you did," she said, her green eyes fixed on his face. "How you stayed with us, made the broth, nursed us through the worst of it. I wanted to thank you properly." Zachariah felt heat rise in his cheeks, unused to such direct gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same," he said, looking down at his coffee cup. "No," she said quietly, "they would not have. Most folks are too afraid of catching the sickness themselves. You risked your health for 2 strangers. That is not something I will forget, Zachariah Owen." The way she said his name sent a shiver down his spine that had nothing to do with cold. He looked up and found her watching him with an intensity that made his breath catch. She was beautiful even in her weakened state, her hair loose around her shoulders, her face thinner than before but no less striking. "I am glad you are feeling better," he said, his voice coming out rougher than intended. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Thanks to you and your magical broth." "Not magical, just good ingredients and time." "And care," she added. "Dorothy told me how you stayed up all night with us. How you kept making us drink even when we wanted to refuse. How you spoke to us, kept us fighting." She reached out and touched his hand where it rested on the table, her fingers cool against his skin. "Thank you, Zachariah. Truly." He found himself unable to look away from her eyes, caught in their green depths like a man drowning. "You are welcome," he managed. "Truly." Dorothy appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame. "Are you bothering our hero, Delilah?" she asked with a teasing smile. "Someone has to," Delilah said, pulling her hand back but still holding Zachariah's gaze. "He seems determined to downplay what he did." "That is just his way," Dorothy said, coming to sit at the table. "I have been asking around town about you, Mr. Owen. Folks say you are the quiet type. Keep to yourself mostly. Work hard, never cause trouble." Zachariah shifted uncomfortably. "I do not see the point in causing trouble." "They also say you are fair in your dealings and honest," Dorothy continued, "and that you are one of the best horsemen in the county." "Horses are easier than people," he said with a slight smile. "They do not talk back as much." Both sisters laughed, and the sound warmed something in Zachariah's chest that had been cold for a long time. His own family was scattered or gone, his father having abandoned them when Zachariah was young. His mother passed now 5 years. He had been alone for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to be in the presence of warmth and laughter. As the days passed, Zachariah continued to visit, and the visits stretched longer each time. He helped Thomas with repairs around the store that had been neglected during the crisis. He brought fresh meat from his hunting trips. He sat at their table for meals and found himself talking more than he had in years, drawn out by Delilah's clever questions and Dorothy's genuine interest. It was Delilah who captivated him most, though he tried not to let it show. She was unlike any woman he had known, forthright and unafraid to speak her mind, but also capable of great tenderness when she thought no one was watching. He saw her with the children who came into the store, slipping extra candy into their bags. He saw her with her father, gently steering him toward rest when he worked too hard. He saw her with Dorothy, the fierce protectiveness of an older sister combined with deep affection. And he saw her watching him when she thought he was not looking, her eyes following him as he moved around the store or sat at their table. It made his heart race in a way that nothing else ever had. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after the sisters had fallen ill, Delilah asked him to ride out with her. "I need to get out of this town for a bit," she said. "Feel the wind in my face. Remember what it is like to be strong again." "Are you sure you are ready for that?" he asked, concerned. "I am ready," she said firmly, "and I want you to come with me." They rode out toward the foothills, where the oak trees grew thick and the land rolled in gentle waves. Delilah sat her horse well, her body moving with the animal's gait in a way that spoke of long familiarity. She had borrowed a split riding skirt from a friend, practical for the terrain, and her hair was braided down her back to keep it from tangling in the wind. They did not speak much as they rode, both content to simply be in motion, to feel the autumn sun on their faces and breathe air that was not tainted with the smell of sickness. When they reached a small creek, they dismounted and let the horses drink while they sat on a fallen log nearby. "I have been thinking," Delilah said after a long silence, "about what would have happened if you had not come that day. If my father's shots had not reached anyone, or if someone else had come who did not know what to do." She turned to look at him. "Dorothy and I would likely be dead now." "Do not think about that," Zachariah said, uncomfortable with the direction of her thoughts. "Why not? It is the truth." She picked up a small stone and tossed it into the creek, watching the ripples spread. "Facing death changes a person, makes you realize how much time you waste on things that do not matter, how much time you spend being afraid to reach for what you want." Zachariah's heart was pounding now, though he kept his expression carefully neutral. "What do you want, Delilah?" She turned to face him fully, and there was no mistaking the look in her eyes. "I want to know you better, Zachariah Owen. I want to understand the man who sat up all night taking care of 2 strangers. I want to hear your stories and learn what makes you laugh. I want—" She paused, a hint of vulnerability showing through her boldness. "I want to see if this thing I feel when I look at you is real." He stared at her, his mouth suddenly dry. "Delilah, I am just a ranch hand. I have nothing to offer someone like you. Someone like me." She raised an eyebrow. "And what am I in your mind? Smart, beautiful, brave, the daughter of a successful businessman. You could have any man in this town." "I do not want any man in this town," she said quietly. "I want the one who saved my life, the one who keeps coming back even though he has no reason to, the one who blushes when I thank him and looks at me when he thinks I cannot see." She reached out and took his hand, her fingers threading through his. "Tell me you do not feel this too, and I will never mention it again." Zachariah looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her face. He saw hope there, and uncertainty, and a courage that humbled him. "I feel it," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "God help me. I have felt it since the moment I saw you in that bed, fighting for your life. I just did not think someone like you would ever look at someone like me." "Then you are a fool," she said, but she was smiling, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Because I have been looking at you since the day I met you, Zachariah. I just was not brave enough to say anything until death reminded me how short life can be." He lifted his free hand to her face, his palm cupping her cheek. She leaned into the touch, her eyes closing briefly. "I am not good with words," he said. and I do not know how to court a woman properly. But if you will have me, I will do my best to make you happy. Kiss me, she whispered, opening her eyes. That is all the courting I need right now. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but she met him halfway. Their lips touched gently at first, a tentative exploration, and then with more certainty as the spark between them ignited into flame. She tasted of hope and new beginnings, and when they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. Well, Delilah said, a bit shakily, that was worth nearly dying for. Zachariah laughed, a sound that felt strange and wonderful after so much solemnity. You have a dark sense of humor, Miss Rose. Call me Delilah, she said, resting her forehead against his. And yes, I do. You will have to get used to it if you plan on sticking around. I plan on sticking around, he said firmly, for as long as you will have me. They sat by the creek for a long while, talking about everything and nothing, learning the contours of each other's lives and dreams. Delilah told him about her mother, about how much she missed her wisdom and guidance. She spoke of her hopes for the store, her desire to expand it into a real trading post that could serve the miners and ranchers throughout the region. She admitted her fear that she was not capable of filling her mother's shoes, that she would somehow fail her father and sister. Zachariah listened, truly listened, and when she was done, he told her his own story, about his father's abandonment and his mother's quiet strength, about learning to rely on himself from a young age, to find satisfaction in hard work and simple pleasures, about his dream of someday owning his own ranch, a place where he could raise horses and build something lasting. We could build it together, Delilah said softly. The ranch and the store, they could support each other. You are getting ahead of yourself, Zachariah said, but he was smiling. We have only just kissed for the first time. I know what I want, she said, that familiar determination back in her voice, and I do not see the point in pretending otherwise. But you are right. We should take our time. Get to know each other properly. Let me show you off to the town, so everyone knows you are spoken for. Spoken for? He raised an eyebrow. Absolutely, she said with a grin. I found you first. I am not letting anyone else get ideas. When they rode back to town as the sun was setting, they were holding hands across the space between their horses, neither willing to break the connection. Thomas was waiting on the porch of the store, his face anxious until he saw them both smiling. Relief washed over his features, followed by understanding. I see, he said as they dismounted. I suppose I should have expected this. Delilah went to her father and kissed his cheek. I hope you do not mind, she said, but I have claimed him. Thomas looked at Zachariah, who met his gaze steadily. You saved my daughter's lives, the older man said, and from what I have seen of you these past weeks, you are a good man, an honorable man. If Delilah wants you, I would be proud to have you as part of our family, but only if that is what you want too. It is, Zachariah said without hesitation. More than anything. Then welcome, Thomas said, extending his hand. Zachariah shook it, feeling the strength in the older man's grip and seeing the approval in his eyes. Dorothy appeared from inside, took one look at the three of them, and let out a whoop of joy. Finally, she exclaimed. I was wondering how long you two were going to dance around each other. We were not dancing, Delilah protested. You absolutely were, Dorothy said, coming to hug her sister. But I am glad you have stopped. He is a good man, Delilah. You chose well. I know, Delilah said, looking back at Zachariah with such open affection that it made his chest ache. I know. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Sierra City had seen before, primarily because Delilah refused to be coy or subtle about her feelings. She walked through town with her hand in Zachariah's, introduced him proudly to everyone they met, and made it abundantly clear that he was hers and she was his. Some of the older women clucked their tongues at such forward behavior, but most people were charmed by the young couple's obvious devotion to each other. Zachariah found himself drawn deeper into the Rose family's life. He took his meals with them more often than not, helped in the store when they were busy, and spent his evenings sitting on their porch talking with Thomas about everything from politics to the price of cattle. Dorothy treated him like the brother she had never had, teasing him mercilessly but also seeking his advice on matters both trivial and important. But it was Delilah who owned his heart completely. Every day he discovered something new about her that made him fall harder. The way she hummed while she worked, her fierce loyalty to those she loved, her sharp business mind that could calculate profit margins faster than most men could write them down, her kindness to those less fortunate, slipping credit to families she knew were struggling, her laughter, bright and uninhibited, her tears, rare but genuine when something moved her deeply. 3 months after they first kissed by the creek, Zachariah knew he could not wait any longer. He had been saving money since he was 16, putting aside every spare penny toward his dream of a ranch. He took some of those savings and rode to Sacramento to visit a jeweler, where he chose a simple gold ring with a small emerald that reminded him of Delilah's eyes. He asked Thomas for permission first, of course, sitting across from the older man in the store late one evening. "I want to marry your daughter," he said without preamble. "I know I do not have much to offer her yet, but I am working toward it. I have savings for a ranch, and I am a hard worker. I will take care of her, Thomas. I will love her and protect her and do everything in my power to make her happy." Thomas studied him for a long moment, then smiled. "You know Delilah well enough by now to know that she does not need much taking care of. She is more than capable of looking after herself. What she needs is a partner, someone who will stand beside her, not in front of her. Someone who will support her dreams while pursuing his own. Can you be that for her?" "I can," Zachariah said. "I will." "Then you have my blessing," Thomas said, standing to shake his hand. "Though I suspect Delilah would marry you with or without it. That girl knows her own mind." Zachariah planned to propose on a Sunday afternoon, taking Delilah back to the creek where they had first kissed. He had it all worked out in his mind, the words he would say and the way he would kneel. But Delilah, as usual, had other ideas. They were in the store's storeroom, taking inventory of the supplies, when she suddenly set down her clipboard and turned to face him. "Are you ever going to ask me to marry you? Or do I need to ask you?" He stared at her, the paper in his hand forgotten. "What?" "I am not blind, Zachariah. You rode to Sacramento last week and came back with something small enough to fit in your pocket. You have been acting nervous around me ever since. And my father keeps giving me these knowing looks." She crossed her arms, but her eyes were dancing with amusement. "So I figure you either bought me a ring or you have taken up smoking, and I know you think tobacco is a waste of money." He could not help but laugh. "You are completely impossible. You know that?" "I have been told," she said, smiling. "So?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small box, opening it to reveal the ring. "I was going to take you to the creek. Make it romantic and special." "This is romantic and special," she said, looking at the ring with tears in her eyes. "Because it is us, real and honest and not pretending to be something we are not." He took the ring out and held it up. "Delilah Rose, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to make you as happy as you make me? Will you be my partner in all things, building a life together that is ours alone?" "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes to all of it. Yes to you, Zachariah Owen, now and always." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and then she was in his arms, kissing him with a passion that made him forget they were in a storeroom surrounded by sacks of flour and canned goods. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she laughed and pressed her forehead to his. "We are getting married," she said, as if testing the words. "I am going to be your wife. And I am going to be your husband," he said, still marveling at the wonder of it. "God help me. I am the luckiest man alive." They set the date for early spring, wanting to give themselves time to prepare but not willing to wait too long. Dorothy threw herself into planning mode, enlisting the help of several women in town to make Delilah's dress and organize the celebration. Thomas insisted on providing a generous wedding breakfast at the hotel, inviting half the town. Zachariah used more of his savings to buy a small plot of land just outside town, where he began the work of building a house for his bride. It was humble, just 3 rooms to start with, but he built it with his own hands and with help from friends he had made in town. The frame went up in February, the walls in March. He worked every spare moment, determined to have it ready for Delilah. Thomas and Dorothy came out regularly to see the progress, bringing food and encouragement. Delilah came too, offering suggestions and helping where she could, her eyes alight with excitement as she watched their future home take shape. "We will add on as we need to," Zachariah told her as they stood looking at the finished structure one evening. "When children come, we will build more rooms. When the ranch grows, we will expand." "It is perfect," Delilah said, squeezing his hand, "because you built it for us." The wedding took place on a brilliant April morning in 1878, with the wildflowers blooming across the hills and the air sweet with the scent of spring. Delilah wore a simple white dress that Dorothy and the town women had sewn, her hair loose and crowned with flowers. She was the most beautiful thing Zachariah had ever seen, and when she walked toward him with her father's arm through hers, he had to blink back tears. The ceremony was held in the small church on the edge of town, with most of Sierra City in attendance. Dorothy stood as maid of honor, her eyes wet with happy tears. A ranch owner Zachariah worked for sometimes stood as his best man, clapping him on the shoulder encouragingly. The minister spoke of love and commitment, of 2 becoming one, and then Zachariah was saying his vows, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "I promise to stand beside you, not in front of you," he said, echoing Thomas's words from months before. "To support your dreams and share your burdens. To love you in sickness and in health, in times of plenty and times of want. To be your partner and your friend, today and all the days of our lives." Delilah's vows were equally heartfelt, her green eyes locked on his as she spoke. "I promise to build a life with you that honors both of us. To never stop reaching for you, never stop choosing you. To be your shelter in storms and your companion in joy. To love you fiercely and tenderly, with all that I am, for as long as I breathe." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and told Zachariah he could kiss his bride, the church erupted in cheers. Zachariah pulled Delilah close and kissed her thoroughly, not caring who was watching, pouring all his love and devotion into that single moment. The celebration afterward was joyous and loud, with music and dancing and more food than seemed possible. Thomas gave a speech that had everyone laughing and crying in turns. Dorothy embarrassed her sister with stories from their childhood. Neighbors and friends offered congratulations and gifts, most of them practical things the young couple would need for their new home. As the sun was setting, Zachariah and Delilah slipped away from the party, riding out to their new house together. Someone had been there before them, lighting lanterns and laying a fire in the hearth, leaving flowers on the table and fresh linens on the bed. Probably Dorothy, Delilah guessed with a smile. That night, they began their life together as husband and wife, learning each other with tenderness and passion, finding joy in the intimacy they had waited for. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the night outside their window. "I love you," Delilah whispered. "I do not think I have said it enough today." "You showed it," Zachariah said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "In every look, every touch, every smile. But I will never tire of hearing the words. I love you," she said again, "and I will keep saying it every day for the rest of our lives." The first year of their marriage was both challenging and wonderful. Zachariah continued working for the local ranchers while slowly building up his own herd with horses he bought, trained, and sold. Delilah divided her time between helping her father at the store and establishing their home, proving herself as capable at keeping house as she was at keeping accounts. Dorothy visited often, and Thomas took meals with them at least twice a week. They learned each other's rhythms and habits, the small quirks that made them individuals and the shared values that bound them together. They had their first real fight about 3 months in, when Zachariah came home late from a cattle drive without sending word, and Delilah had worked herself into a state of anxiety imagining all the terrible things that could have happened to him. They yelled, both frightened and angry, and then cried in each other's arms as they realized how much they needed to communicate better. After that, they made a point of always being honest with each other, even when the truth was difficult. Zachariah told Delilah when he felt inadequate compared to the other businessmen in town. Delilah admitted when she was overwhelmed by trying to balance all her responsibilities. They supported each other through doubts and fears, celebrated each other's victories, and slowly built a partnership that was stronger than either of them alone. By the end of that first year, Zachariah had acquired 10 horses and built a small stable behind their house. Delilah had expanded her father's store inventory to include saddles and tack, creating a natural synergy between the two businesses. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. It was in the winter of their second year of marriage that Delilah discovered she was pregnant. She suspected before she was certain, recognizing the signs from other women she had known. When the doctor confirmed it, she rode out to where Zachariah was working with a young stallion in the corral, unable to wait until evening to tell him. He saw her face and immediately came to the fence, his expression concerned. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," she said, her smile so wide it hurt her cheeks. "Everything is right. Zachariah, we are going to have a baby." He stared at her for a long moment, as if processing the words, and then he vaulted over the fence and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests. "A baby," he said, setting her down gently as if she might break. "We are going to have a baby. In the summer," she said. "Around July, the doctor thinks." His hand went to her still flat stomach, his touch reverent. "I am going to be a father, and I am going to be a mother," she said, covering his hand with hers. "Our child, Zachariah, a whole new person made from our love." He pulled her close, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "I will take care of you," he promised. "Both of you. I will build on to the house, make room for the nursery. I will work harder, earn more, give you everything you need." "You already give me everything I need," she said, looking up at him with tears in her eyes. "You give me love and partnership and a life full of joy. That is all any child could want from a father." The pregnancy was not easy. Delilah suffered from terrible sickness in the early months, able to keep down only dry bread and weak tea. Zachariah hovered anxiously, making her the same broth that had saved her from the flu, coaxing her to eat even when she did not want to. Dorothy moved in for a few weeks to help, and Thomas visited daily, both of them as protective of Delilah as Zachariah was. As she entered the middle months, the sickness faded and was replaced by a glowing energy. Delilah threw herself into preparing for the baby, sewing tiny clothes and making blankets, reading every book about childcare she could find. Zachariah built the nursery addition, working long hours to have it ready, painting the walls a cheerful yellow and building a cradle from oak wood that he sanded until it was smooth as silk. In late July, On a hot afternoon when the cicadas were singing in the trees, Delilah's labor began. Dorothy and the midwife came immediately, shooing Zachariah out of the bedroom despite his protests. He paced the front room like a caged animal, flinching at every sound from behind the closed door. Thomas sat with him, offering quiet reassurance and occasionally pushing a glass of whiskey into his hand. The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. Zachariah had never felt so helpless in his life, hearing Delilah's cries and unable to do anything to ease her pain. He prayed more than he had in years, bargaining with God to keep his wife safe, to bring their child into the world healthy and whole. When the baby's cry finally rang out, thin and indignant, Zachariah nearly collapsed with relief. Dorothy emerged a few minutes later, tired but smiling. "You have a son," she said, "and your wife is asking for you." He rushed into the room to find Delilah propped up in bed, exhausted and pale but with a radiance about her that took his breath away. In her arms was a tiny bundle, and when he came closer, he saw a small red face, wrinkled and perfect, with a shock of dark hair. "Meet your son," Delilah said softly. "Zachary Thomas Owen." Zachariah sat on the edge of the bed, unable to take his eyes off the baby. "You named him after us," he said, his voice choked. "Of course," she said. "He is part of both of us. Our love made real." She carefully transferred the baby into his arms, and Zachariah held his son for the first time, marveling at how small and fragile he was, how much trust was being placed in him. "I will protect you," he whispered to the baby. "I will teach you and guide you and love you. I will be the father I never had. I promise." The baby's eyes opened briefly, unfocused and dark, and then closed again as he settled against his father's chest. Delilah watched them with tears streaming down her face, tears of joy and exhaustion and overwhelming love. Being parents changed them in ways both expected and surprising. The sleepless nights were harder than they had imagined, the constant worry about whether they were doing everything right wearing on their nerves. But the first time Zachary smiled at them, around 6 weeks old, every difficulty faded into insignificance. The way he gripped Zachariah's finger with his tiny hand, the sound of his laugh when Dorothy made funny faces, the peaceful weight of him sleeping on Delilah's chest. They learned to navigate parenthood as they had learned everything else in their marriage. Together, with patience and humor and love, Zachariah built a sling that allowed Delilah to carry the baby while working in the store. They took turns walking the floor with Zachary when he was fussy. They marveled together over every milestone, every new development. The business continued to grow. Zachariah's reputation as a horse trainer spread throughout the county, and he found himself with more work than he could handle. He hired a young man from town to help with the training, and together they built the operation into something substantial. Delilah's contributions to the store had helped increase profits by nearly a third, and Thomas began talking about opening a second location in a neighboring town. When Zachary was 2 years old, Delilah became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to expect. In the spring of 1881, she gave birth to a daughter they named Dahlia Margaret, after Delilah and her late mother. She had her mother's green eyes and her father's dark hair, and from the moment she entered the world, she had her entire family wrapped around her tiny finger. Zachary was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything from diaper changes to feeding. Zachariah watched his son's gentle care of the baby and felt his heart swell with pride. They were building something here, he realized. Not just a business or a home, but a family, a legacy. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch grew, with Zachariah eventually acquiring enough land to run a small herd of cattle alongside the horses. The store thrived, with Dorothy taking on more responsibility as Thomas began to slow down with age. The children grew, Zachary tall and serious like his father, Dahlia spirited and clever like her mother. There were hard times too. A drought in 1883 that killed half their cattle. A fire in the store that same year that destroyed part of the inventory. Thomas's death in 1885. Peaceful in his sleep, but devastating nonetheless. Through it all, Zachariah and Delilah held fast to each other and their family, weathering the storms together. They added another room to the house when Delilah became pregnant for the third time, welcoming another son they named Daniel in 1886. By then, Zachary was 8 and Dahlia was 5, both old enough to be excited about the new baby. The house was full of noise and laughter and love. Everything Zachariah had dreamed of in his lonely years before Delilah. Dorothy married a schoolteacher who moved to Sierra City in 1887, a gentle man named William who treated her with kindness and respect. They built a house on the other side of town, and their children grew up alongside Zachariah and Delilah's, cousins who were as close as siblings. The two families gathered for Sunday dinners, holidays, and every celebration in between. As the years passed, Zachariah and Delilah watched their children grow into capable young adults. Zachary showed an aptitude for the horse business, working alongside his father and learning everything he could. Dahlia had her mother's head for numbers and spent hours at the store, which Dorothy now ran with Delilah's help. Daniel was still finding his way, but he had a gift with people that made everyone who met him smile. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Zachariah took Delilah back to the creek where he had first kissed her. Their hair showed threads of silver now, and their faces bore the lines of years lived fully, but their love had only deepened with time. "Do you remember what you said to me that day?" Delilah asked, sitting on the same log where they had sat all those years ago. "About being just a ranch hand with nothing to offer?" "I remember," Zachariah said, sitting beside her and taking her hand. "I was a fool." "You were," she agreed with a smile, "because you had everything to offer. Your heart, your dedication, your love. Those things matter more than money or status or anything else. You saw something in me I did not see in myself," he said. "You gave me a family, a home, a purpose. You gave me everything." "We gave it to each other," she corrected. "That is what partnership means. Building something together that neither of us could have built alone." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the water flow over the rocks, the same sound that had been the backdrop to their first kiss. So much had changed since that day, but the essential truth remained. They were meant for each other, two people who had found in each other the missing piece of themselves. "I love you," Zachariah said. "I loved you when you were sick with fever and fighting for your life. I loved you when you boldly told me what you wanted by this creek. I loved you on our wedding day and the day our first child was born. I love you now, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Delilah said, tears glistening in her eyes. "My hero, my partner, my best friend. You saved my life that day with your broth and your care, but you also saved my heart. You taught me what real love looks like, and I am grateful for you every single day." He kissed her then, a kiss that held 15 years of love and devotion, of shared joys and weathered sorrows, of a life built together one day at a time. When they pulled apart, both were smiling through their tears. They rode back to their ranch as the sun set, their home visible in the distance with smoke rising from the chimney. Zachary was probably starting dinner, Dahlia helping him while Daniel set the table. It was their children's tradition to cook for their parents on their anniversary, a gesture of love and gratitude. As they approached, they saw the whole family gathered on the porch. Their 3 children, Dorothy and William, and their 4 children, all waiting to celebrate with them. The sight made Zachariah's throat tighten with emotion. This was what they had built, he and Delilah. Not just a successful business or a prosperous ranch, but a family full of love and connection. A legacy that would last long after they were gone. That night, surrounded by everyone they loved, Zachariah caught Delilah's eye across the crowded table. She smiled at him, that same smile that had captured his heart 15 years ago, and mouthed the words, "I love you." He mouthed them back, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. Later, when everyone had gone home and they lay together in their bed, Delilah curled against his side like she had every night of their marriage. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. "I am thinking about that day your father fired those shots," he said. "How I almost did not come. I was tired, and I had work to finish, and part of me wanted to ignore it. But something made me go. Fate, maybe, or God, or just dumb luck. Whatever it was, I am grateful for it every single day." "So am I," she said. "Everything good in my life came from that moment. You, our children, this life we have built. All because you heard those shots and decided to help. All because I made you some broth," he said with a slight smile. "The magical broth that cured the flu and won my heart," she teased. "Not magical, just good ingredients and care. And love," she added. "You put love into it even for two strangers. That is what made the difference." They drifted off to sleep wrapped in each other's arms, content in the knowledge that they had found what so many people spent their whole lives searching for. True partnership, deep love, and a family built on a foundation of care and commitment. The years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and new joys. They became grandparents when Zachary married a sweet young woman named Emily, and they had a son. Dahlia eventually took over running the store completely, expanding it just as she had always dreamed. Daniel found his calling as a mediator, helping settle disputes between ranchers and farmers, his natural charisma serving him well. Through it all, Zachariah and Delilah remained each other's constant. They still took rides out to their creek on special occasions. They still sat on their porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sunset. They still laughed together, argued occasionally, and always chose each other. As they grew older, their children began to worry about them, trying to convince them to slow down and take it easy. But Zachariah was not about to stop working with his horses, and Delilah had no intention of leaving the store entirely. They scaled back their involvement, certainly training the next generation to take over. But they never stopped being active, never stopped engaging with the life they had built. On a warm October evening in 1902, 25 years after that fateful day when Delilah and Dorothy had been sick with flu, the family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. For generations were now represented. Zachariah and Delilah, their children, their grandchildren, and their first great-grandchild, a baby girl born just weeks before. Zachariah, now 51, stood with Delilah, now 47, watching their family fill their home with noise and laughter and love. His hair was more silver than dark now, and her face showed the years, but they were both still strong and vital, blessed with good health and better fortune. "We did well," Delilah said, leaning against him as they watched Zachary playing with his grandchildren in the yard. "Look at all of this. Look at what we created." "We did very well," Zachariah agreed, his arm around her waist. "Better than I ever could have imagined that day I rode into town hearing your father's shots." "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had not come?" she asked. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But not often, because I did come. I made you that broth and told you to drink it that you would feel better. And you did feel better, and then everything else followed. Our whole life together, all from that one moment. 'Drink this, you will feel better,'" she quoted with a smile. "The most important words anyone ever said to me. Not because of the broth, but because of who said them. Because of the care and devotion that came with them." Their oldest grandson came running up, tugging on Zachariah's sleeve. "Grandpa, tell us the story again, about how you saved Grandma and Aunt Dorothy." Zachariah laughed and ruffled the boy's hair. "You have heard that story 100 times. But we love it," the boy insisted. "Please, So Zachariah gathered the grandchildren around and told them the story once more, about the shots fired in desperation, about the two sisters sick with fever, about the broth that helped turn the tide. He told it simply, without embellishment, but the children listened with rapt attention as they always did. What he did not tell them, because they were too young to understand, was how that day had changed the entire trajectory of his life. How meeting Delilah Rose had transformed him from a lonely ranch hand into a husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. How loving her had taught him that he was capable of so much more than he had believed. How building a life with her had given him purpose and joy beyond measure. When the story was done and the children ran off to play, Delilah took his hand. "You are a good storyteller," she said, "though you always leave out the best parts." "What parts are those?" "The part where I fell in love with you. The part where you kissed me by the creek. The part where we built all of this together, day by day, year by year." She gestured at their home, their family, their life. "Those are the real story. Those parts are just for us," he said, pulling her close. "Our private memories. Until we are old and gray and telling them to embarrass our great-great-grandchildren," she said with a laugh. "We are already old and gray," he pointed out. "Speak for yourself. I am in my prime." She kissed him, quick and sweet. "And so are you, Zachariah Owen. So are you." As the sun set on that perfect October evening, with their family gathered around them and their whole life spread out like a tapestry of love and memory, Zachariah and Delilah stood together on the porch of the home he had built for her 24 years before. Their hands were clasped, their shoulders touching, their hearts beating in the rhythm they had learned together over a quarter-century of marriage. The story that had begun with illness and broth, with a stranger's kindness and a desperate father's plea, had become something neither of them could have predicted. It had become a love story for the ages, a testament to what could be built when two people committed fully to each other and to the life they were creating together. In the distance, the Sierra Nevada mountains stood dark against the purple sky, the same mountains that had witnessed their courtship and marriage and the raising of their family. Sierra City, California had been their home through prosperity and hardship, through joy and sorrow, and it would remain their home for all the years they had left. "What are you thinking?" Delilah asked, as she had asked him countless times over their years together. Zachariah smiled, looking down at the woman who had been his partner, his love, his everything. "I am thinking that I would do it all again," he said. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would hear those shots and ride to help. I would make that broth and watch you drink it. I would fall in love with you all over again. I would choose you, always you, in every version of my life." "Good answer," she said, her eyes bright with tears and laughter, "because I would choose you too. Every time, every way, forever." They stood together as the stars began to appear overhead, surrounded by the sounds of their family, secure in the knowledge that their love had created something that would last long beyond their own lives. The ranch would continue, passed down through generations. The store would thrive, a fixture of Sierra City for years to come. But most importantly, the love they had shared, the partnership they had forged, would be remembered and honored by all those whose lives they had touched. It had all started with two sisters sick with flu, and a cowboy who made broth and said, "Drink this, you will feel better." But it had become so much more than that simple beginning. It had become a life worth living, a love worth having, and a legacy worth leaving behind. And as Zachariah and Delilah Owen stood together under the stars, their hands clasped and their hearts full, they knew that every moment of their journey together had been worth it. Every struggle, every triumph, every ordinary day, and every extraordinary one. They had built something beautiful together, something lasting, something true. Their story was complete, their love proven through decades of devotion, their family flourishing around them. They had found what everyone seeks but few truly find. A partnership that makes each person better, a love that grows stronger with time, and a life filled with meaning and purpose. The broth that Zachariah had made all those years ago had done more than help two sick sisters recover from the flu. It had opened the door to a future neither of them could have imagined, had been the catalyst for a love story that would be told and retold for generations. In the end, it was not the broth itself that mattered, but the care and compassion it represented, the kindness that sparked connection, and the love that grew from that first act of service. As the night deepened and the family began to drift inside, Zachariah and Delilah remained on the porch a little longer, reluctant to let go of the perfect moment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, as every tomorrow did. But tonight, they had everything they needed: each other, their family, and the peace that comes from a life well lived together. "I love you," Delilah said one more time, as she had said thousands of times before and would say thousands of times again. "I love you too," Zachariah replied, the words as true and as necessary as breathing. Always have, always will. And that, in the end, was the whole story. Not the dramatic rescue or the miraculous recovery. Not the successful businesses or the beautiful home. The story was simply this: two people who found each other, chose each other, and built a life together based on love, respect, and unwavering commitment. Everything else was just details, the scaffolding around the central truth of their devotion to each other. They walked inside together, ready to rejoin their family, ready to face whatever came next, ready for all the tomorrows they had been blessed with. Their story had a perfect ending because it was not really an ending at all, but a continuation of the love that had sustained them through 25 years and would sustain them through however many years remained. The house was warm and bright with lamplight, full of the voices of those they loved most. Zachariah's hand found Delilah's once more as they crossed the threshold, a gesture so familiar and so necessary that neither of them even thought about it anymore. They were two halves of a whole, partners in every sense of the word, and they would remain so until their final days. Outside, the Sierra Nevada stood eternal watch over the valley, over the town of Sierra City, over the Owen Ranch and all who lived there. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the human dramas playing out below. But in that small house filled with light and love and laughter, something precious existed. A family bound together by blood and choice, a legacy of love built day by day, and a marriage that had proven itself through the test of time. Zachariah and Delilah Owen had started with nothing but hope and determination and a bowl of broth offered in kindness. They had built an empire of love from those humble beginnings, had created a family that would carry their values forward into the future, had proven that the best things in life come from simple acts of caring and commitment. As they settled into their evening, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, they knew they had succeeded in the only way that truly mattered. They had loved well, lived fully, and created something beautiful that would outlast them both. Their story, which had begun with sickness and healing, had become a testament to the transformative power of love, the strength of partnership, and the beauty of a life shared completely with another person. And if anyone had asked them what the secret was, they would have said simply this: choose each other, every day, no matter what comes. Support each other's dreams, share each other's burdens, and never forget why you fell in love in the first place. Everything else would follow from that foundation, as their own lives had proven so completely. The fire crackled in the hearth, the family laughed and talked around them, and Zachariah and Delilah sat together in perfect contentment, their hands clasped, their hearts full, their story complete. They had everything they needed and more than they had ever dared to hope for, all because of one moment of compassion, one bowl of broth, and one simple instruction that had changed everything. Drink this, you will feel better. And she had felt better. They both had. They had spent 25 years feeling better, being better, building better, together. Their love story was one for the record books, a Wild West romance that had stood the test of time and emerged stronger for it. They had faced down illness and hardship, had celebrated triumphs and mourned losses, had raised children and built businesses and created a life that mattered. As the evening wore on and eventually came to its natural close, as family members hugged goodbye and headed to their own homes, Zachariah and Delilah prepared for bed in the room they had shared for 24 years. The routine was familiar and comforting. The undressing, the washing, the sliding between clean sheets, the final kiss goodnight. "Thank you," Delilah said softly in the darkness. "For what?" Zachariah asked, though he was smiling. "For everything. For coming that day when my father called for help. For making the broth that saved our lives. For falling in love with me. For building this life with me. For being exactly who you are." She paused. "For all of it. Thank you for letting me," he replied. "For seeing something in me worth loving. For taking a chance on a ranch hand with big dreams and empty pockets. For being my partner in all things. For giving me a family and a home and a reason to wake up grateful every morning." They lay in comfortable silence, listening to each other breathe, feeling the warmth of each other's presence. Tomorrow they would wake and begin again, as they had done for 25 years and would continue to do for as long as they were given. But tonight, they rested in the security of their love and the satisfaction of their shared accomplishments. The story of Zachariah and Delilah Owen, which had begun with two sisters sick with flu and a cowboy who made broth, had become the story of a love that conquered all obstacles, a partnership that created something lasting, and a family that would carry their legacy forward for generations to come. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, and worth honoring. And as they drifted off to sleep, their fingers still intertwined, they knew that if they had the chance to live their lives over again, they would not change a single thing. Every moment had been necessary, every challenge had made them stronger, every joy had been magnified by sharing it. They had lived and loved with everything they had, and that was the greatest achievement of all. Their story was complete, their love was eternal, and their legacy was secure. What more could anyone ask from a life than that?